Hello, everybody. Good to see you all again. We'll give people a few moments to notice that we're live and if they're available to join us. But welcome to our weekly Christian Fellowship show. We're Christian Witnesses of Jah, Christians, but you may not have heard of us in that regard. Or maybe you have. It's like we're very popular, but we're not unknown. And we have people all around the earth that represent, in our view, the essential teachings of the Bible. One God the Father, Jesus, sent forth Savior, the Messiah, and the Golden Rule, treating and loving each other the way we want to be treated or loved. We put those three things above everything else because we believe that those three things are more clear than anything else when it comes to what we're supposed to do, the absolute essential things that if you don't have these three things in our view, it would be hard to understand how you could be a biblical Christian. I mean, maybe you could be. We'd have to maybe talk, like we talk to other people. For example, Trinitarians, right? They're a group that is more well known in terms of their name. But when it comes to doctrine, right, even though we're the Christian Witnesses of Jah, we don't have like later doctrine, right? We're not Mormons. We're not Watchtower, even though people like me who are Christian Witnesses of Jah began our spiritual journey in groups like Watchtower. But as you go on any journey, you start to realize where you're headed and whether or not you want to continue going down that path. Even Watchtower teaches that, right? Watchtower is very well known for letting people know, hey, are you sure you're on the right road? Right? It used to be in the You Can Live Forever book. I'm sure it still is, or at least a part of it where it would show, hey, if someone's trying to show you the right way, wouldn't you want to go down the right path? So for us, fundamentally, the right path is the God of the Bible, exactly as he is identified in the Bible. One God, the Father. And yes, we identify his name unequivocally as Jah or Yah in Hebrew, but we speak in English because it's not really disputed phonetically or even in its inclusion in the Old and New Testaments. Sometimes people try to dispute the occurrences of Jah in Revelation 19, but it won't work because it's there. And it wasn't originally known as or used only as or even as an expression where the name wasn't understood individually as the object of the praise. Hallelujah. So it's all later stuff, right? This whole disengagement with the divine name that we see in so many religious groups after the first century because the Christians began to be persecuted in ways that were, not just from the Gentiles, Romans, and others, but from the Jews as well. Of course, many Jews and Gentiles became Christians, so there was this intermingling. But nevertheless, it was very apparent that at some point, both the Old Testament, right, the Jewish Septuagint that was originally using the divine name all over the place, first century and earlier. Since the end of the first century and following, we get these abbreviations, right? These nomina sacra, and this constant increasing use. So you have right at the same time, the New Testament copies we have anyway, about 100 years after the original, earliest, that would contain an instance of the divine name quoted from the Old Testament. So we have this date, this time frame where things were changing or changed for a variety of reasons. And many of the church fathers tell us some of these reasons had to do with the fact they didn't believe God had a name. The Gentile converts to Christianity who were more Platonized in their thinking or in other respects, again, disengaged from the actual name of the God of the Bible because maybe for Jesus or other reasons, but they explicitly state, for example, in the case of Justin Martyr and others, they echo Platonic and other, non-biblical thinking with respect to this idea that God doesn't have a name, which is not true, right? It's very obviously not true according to the use of the proper name of God throughout the Old Testament and elsewhere by the people who were involved with the God of the Bible throughout ancient times, and others who commented on those and those who invoked this God of ancient times, right? Historians like Diodorus, Greek writer of the 1st century BCE. So there are many sources we can look at over time and see where these beliefs came from. One God the Father is not unique to the Christian Witnesses of Jah. Jesus as the sent forth Savior from heaven, firstborn of all creation, is not unique to the Christian Witnesses of Jah. Golden rule, nope. What is unique is the fact that we emphasize these three above all else. And we actually do take a form of the name that's really indisputable, as I said earlier, for reasons I gave earlier, at least above all other forms of the name, even though we believe we can point to information and evidence that shows pretty clearly how we should be pronouncing the other forms of God's name. Nevertheless, we try to focus on the name we can use that will move us past that dispute and into a realm of fellowship, which is why we meet every week if we can. Sometimes I take time off, but I let you know ahead of time if that's the case. Otherwise, I put a notice up usually the same day or earlier saying, hey, we're going to meet later. So what do we talk about? Well, when we meet, we talk about those three things or something related to them most of the time, right? Or we have a series like this, which also relates to those things for reasons you can probably see through the information and understand why, but I'm happy to explain, right, how the angels of Jah relate to the one God of the Bible, Jesus as our sent forth Savior, and the golden rule, right? More so the first two. In the case of our series right now, right, the angels of Jah in Genesis, where are they, what are they doing, and how does this relate to other beliefs, teachings of the Bible, like one God the Father, Jesus as the sent forth Savior, firstborn of all creation. Right, we know Trinity, Trinitarians, Socinians, others, they interpret those things differently. But we're not Trinitarians or Socinians. We're Christian Witnesses of Jah. That's why I take that name, right? We're not just going to be able to walk around and say, hey, I'm a Christian. Oh, really? So what does that mean? Are you a Trinitarian? Hey, yeah, I wish it wasn't that way. I wish we didn't have so many people disagreeing on a fundamental teaching of the Bible. But, I don't always get my way. Who do we have here today? Bankhead and TKS. Yeah, well, we'll see TKS. Either way, we're going to do our thing, right? Anyone's welcome to join. We usually take, well, it can vary. Usually, I would say probably 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the subjects and what comes up, like we just talked about, right? Stuff like that. I had some other things I wanted to bring up too, but I want to make sure I introduce you to this subject and what we're talking about, right? If this is like your first time to this series, oh, well, you should be able to get something from it. But I think if you really want to get the most out of it and understand the depth, width, height, and breadth, all of it, right, that we've been talking about, then, go back and start with the first part of this series. And then there's also the Zechariah series, right? We'll do Exodus probably sometime in the spring, maybe around April or May. We'll take a month or so off, do some other topics, and then we'll start the angels of Jah in Exodus, right? A lot of good stuff there. But as you know, right, in Genesis, it's been incredible the things we have reviewed and discussed, and we got more tonight. We got crows and ravens. Good to see you from Canada. And purple rain. Very nice. Once again from Australia. Good to see you all. So, yeah. As I was saying earlier, we try to focus on the fundamental things We have a lot to do in life. We're people, right? We're humans. We try to do the best we can, but we're Christians. That means, in our view, that we put our faith in Jesus as a real person who lived and who's alive now in our view, right? But one who came down from heaven as the firstborn Son of God. We'll talk a little bit more about that later also. In fact, the accounts that we're going to wrap it up tonight. This is the last part of our Angels of Jah in Genesis. We'll wrap it up tonight. And then next week, like I said, we'll do some other topic and thing. And it might be something good to discern from the thumbnail, at least part of it. But, if you're familiar with the series, you know how we do things here. Purple Rain, Loving the Angels series. Yeah, I like it too. I don't usually like my own videos because I do them. You're right. So it's one of those weird things. But I've actually enjoyed listening to myself doing these videos because I remind myself of things. I was like, okay, it was a good point. Sometimes I forget, but, or it just reminds me, right? Sometimes I've got so many good points, I just don't think I need more. But, there are more, and maybe I do need them. But I feel so confident and strong in my views, right? It's not like I'm just trying to reinforce all the time. We've got to watch that, right? We should be adding, reinforcing. There shouldn't be more than that, right? We should be pretty well along the path. Remember that path I was talking about earlier? That road that even Watchtower and other groups would say, hey, you guys, you're not on the right road, right? Trinitarians would say, hey, you guys, gone, right? But they go with Constantine and all the, later doctrinal stuff. We talk about it. We try to get along with Trinitarians, at least if we can, right? But the doctrinal things make it hard. Trinitarians have a hard time accepting us on a Christian level. We accept Trinitarians, right? We can't let them teach their false doctrine. We understand that they might think that way, and because, it's hard, it's like with Watchtower, right? We try to accommodate them because they've been so used to these views, right? Trinitarians so used to being orthodox in their view of God. So to adopt our view, right, which is one God, the Bible, not later Orthodox Trinitarian dogma. No, it's not in the Bible. I'm sorry. You guys think, no, it's not in the Bible, right? It's very obvious. I was thinking too, it's not just obvious because I say it, right? The fundamental terms, homoousios, contributed by pagan emperor, documented fact, not in the Bible. Contradicts what's in the Bible, right? We go with the Bible, okay? Is that okay with you Trinitarians? All right. So we don't need homoousios, do we? No, we don't. But yet we do, and we're in for orthodoxy. So there's the conflict, right? We have a whole series going on it. Brand new video up right recently, a little heavy. Very important if that subject comes up. Sharpest rule, no exceptions. And it's a rule validated by Sharp and Wallace and others who use those rules all along the way until they get to the very end. And in which case they then don't continue to apply the sharpest rule the way it should be, very obviously. As even they would agree, these nouns are different, but they don't differentiate them the way they should. Hence, they need the sharpest rule, right? It is the right rule. It's the rule that should have been there the whole time if they weren't trying to get to a syntax, right? Trying to use the sharpest rule without realizing it, basically, that it is the right rule. But they knew that was the right thing to focus on because that's how we interpret things, right? That's how they're interpreting it even until they get to the point where they don't want to go any further. They want it to be right there now. And then now just apply that syntax, right? No, don't think about the nouns. God, brother, that's all the same, right? Yeah. No, father, all the same, even though it's different, of course, all the time, depending on who it is, right? And so you have to make these non-syntactical evaluations and applications, hence the semantic weight. Sharpest rule, got to watch it. That is the way, everybody. So, and if you don't understand it, don't worry. It takes a long time. But even if we applied their rules, like I talked about, and like I've talked about for a long time, several decades, it doesn't lead us to the Trinity, right? No, it leads us to, like I was saying a moment ago, it leads us to the God of the Bible and the sons of God as gods, angels of Jah. That's who we're talking about. Identified as gods, identified as sons of God. Jesus is identified as the only begotten God, the mighty God. And as the firstborn, right? He's one of the sons of God. He literally uses the account involving God coming in among the gods, addressing them as sons of the Most High. The difference is, and I had a question recently, and I get this sometimes too. People ask me, Well, how can you say he's comparing himself with those gods and their spirits like the Melchizedek scroll and the whole context of Psalm proves when he's a man on earth? Well, because he's he's often referring back to his life in heaven and his existence overall, right? It's very clear he gave up that. It's what John 1 is all about. It's what Philippians 2 is all about. It's what Colossians 1 is about, most of it. So it's very clear in that regard that when he's referring back to himself, right, when he talks about being with the Father or being a son of God, if David calls him son, then if David calls him Lord, then how can he be his son, right? There are statements he makes that refer back to things that aren't when he was a man. They're before he was a man, while he's talking to people as a man. This is very fundamental and basic interpretations if you're actually allowing the context of the Bible to speak. I'm sorry, it really is. But when your doctrine is just not allowing you to do that, you're not going to do it. You'll do it when you want to. Or if your belief tells you he doesn't have that past referring, discourse, well, then you're just so far gone, we can't deal with you. That's the answer to your question. He regularly refers back to his pre-human life. All the time, in fact. That's where he learned all this stuff from. He literally says that, John 16, 17, right? Talks about things, seeing Abraham, all this stuff. And yet you can't figure out that when he refers back to a text that refers to the sons of God as gods, that was the Jewish understanding documented by the Melchizedek scroll at that time and leading up to it. You don't understand how he can refer back to him being with God, which he does all the time, as a God, in answer to the Jews who accuse him of being that very thing. It's literally what he tells them he's talking about, being a son of God. Why would he do that if that wasn't what they were accusing him of being, right? It's so ridiculous. And then he quotes a text that is all about exactly that. Sons of God as gods. Oh, well, why do you have such a problem? When he calls the sons of God who he came against gods. And he sent me. So what's your problem if I say I'm a son of God? What is it that's so hard to understand about that? I'm going to tell you what's so hard. Nothing, okay? But when your doctrine tells you you can't believe that, it's going to be really hard. And so is everything else, by the way, that your doctrine tells you can't accept. That's why Trinitarians redefine every time Jesus called God a God to person of God. They don't accept the actual, like I said a moment ago with Sharp's rule and the Sharp rule. They don't accept that. Yeah, they'll argue with you that it calls him that, but all the while what they mean is something totally different. Right? They'll argue with you that this proves this is the deity of Jesus. Oh, but we can't invoke the Trinity like Bowman says, right? Well, that's all they mean. There's no deity of Jesus without the Trinity to a Trinitarian. So it's an admission of defeat that you don't want to talk about the Trinity, and that's exactly what it was. He knew it was impossible to do, and I didn't care what he thought about it anyway. I was there to show what he was doing, which was assuming and using the Trinity, well, Bowman in this case, attempting to get me not to expose that that's what he was doing, right? So we'll give him props for strategically trying to make things hard, but it was dishonest in some sense, Rob. I'm sorry. Every single time you use deity or Jesus as God, that's what you mean. And if you don't think so, what do you mean? Yeah, exactly. So you can knock it off with the Trinity isn't a legitimate target. Of course it is. That's your whole understanding. You saying it's not a legitimate target is not evidence it's not a legitimate target. It's you not wanting me to hit the right target. Sorry, I hit it anyway. Boom. Trinity gone. Whole understanding exposed. And all you could do was say, oh, Greg, can't argue against the Trinity. Oh, yeah, sure I can't. You can't prove it. And that's what was proven. And effectively, that's what you're saying when you say that. So good job for you, Rob. We appreciate it. You're a nice guy. I had a good time with you. I don't dislike you. but you're teaching false doctrine, just like all the other Trinitarians do. Maybe you teach some good stuff. I'm sure you're a nice person, like I said. No problems. But no, you wrote a lot of false stuff, actually, and you got rightly exposed. I have a lot more, by the way, and I'm very happy to bring it forth at any time if I feel like it. But I've got other things I'm going to deal with first. And if I decide I want to get back to you Trinitarian apologetic nuts, that's exactly what I'm going to do, because there's so much more. Oh, but at least now we have the sharpest rule out there, very easy to use, and even validated by the very people who use the sharps rule and sharper rule. But then you just show them, hey, wait a minute. When you exclude that, what are you looking at? You're not looking at the syntax. No, even if it's plural, you're using the noun that it is as a plural to say it can't be the same as the other plural. So it's always about the noun pretty much. And even if it's just got some grammatical, non-syntactical factors, the majority of refinements they make to get to that rule is all sharpest rule. And then they just stop, right? They're going to come up with everything, right? Because once you go beyond the syntax, remember, watch the video. Very important. You might have to watch it a few times. Once you go beyond the syntax, you're outside, it's over. And they do that all the time, everywhere, in fact. Most of the places. Most of the time, anyway. And then at the end, they say, no, okay, now just apply this syntax. And then we'll reinterpret the nouns. And we won't look at the nouns right now, right? Because we've been looking at them all the way to get here. But now we don't want to do that. We just want you to look at the syntax. And then after you only look at the syntax, then we'll look at the nouns again, okay? And we'll tell you what they mean, because you won't be able to determine that based on their usage in their context, because they didn't mean that back then. But they mean that now. So we're going to tell you what they mean, right? Yeah. All that stuff. Either way, we called their bluff. Done. Over. We got so much more. I don't want to hear it. They can say all they want. This game is over. Just like with Watchtower. Watchtower people, hey, we like you, like with Trinitarians. I wish we could all come together. I do. But, the fact is, you guys are all condemning everybody for ridiculousness. Trinitarians condemn us for believing exactly what the Bible teaches. One God the Father. Socinians disagree with us because we teach what the Bible explicitly teaches. Before Abraham existed, I have been. I have been in existence. That's what John 8:58 means. Very obvious. It's what the context means. Many other texts mean done, game over, out of here. Yet we're the ones? No, I don't think so. Watchtower. Holy, you guys are gone. Right? It's just embarrassing at this point that you guys continue to hang on to the remnants of this destroyed. They've literally destroyed it. And you're all trapped in this sinking ship. And, I think you guys deserve to be there. Many of you would actually want us to jump onto that wreckage of false doctrine and failed chronology as it is going through its final stages of collapse. You want us to jump off of explicit biblical teachings that also give us the freedom to do what we as Christians should do and be judged as we should be judged, not like you, or the way you, none of it is right? The whole backroom system, gone, right? They have left Matthew 18. They've left it all, right? They've been the great crowd for about 100 years now. They're not the great crowd at all, right? What do you mean there's not a problem? What do you mean there isn't something there that's of concern? You think people are good there? Hey, Watchtower supporters, let me ask you this question. Do you think Hal Fleming's is good? I know Hal Fleming's, right? I think he's someone I respect in many ways. You think he's good? You think the governing body's good? No one is good. Don't you understand that? Do you not? You use that that text, that teaching from Jesus against the Trinitarians. No one is good but one, God. You use it. It's in your all of it. Okay, so who's good? No, Hal Flemings is not good. He's not like an evil person. I'm not saying that. Like I said, I respect him. Some of you, the way when you email me or message me and you refer to these people that I know, no. No one is good. Do you not? If you don't understand that, this is in fact what they don't understand. In fact, I would almost say at this point, it's probably not even a good idea to talk to really hardcore Watchtower people. It's not going to help you until they're willing to separate. Right? There's too much at stake. It's not even so much do they see it or not. You won't really know that, not until they break, because they're going to hold it together until they either let go or they keep holding. So I don't want you to get frustrated, but if you do end up talking to Watchtower people, ask them this. Is the governing body, anyone on the governing body, good? Right? Because many of them probably don't know Hal Flemings. I do think Hal Flemings is Hal Flemings is a nice guy. He's a Watchtower guy, apologist. But everybody, no. Whether it's Hal Flemings or Nelson Hurley or anyone else, if they weren't willing or aren't willing now to stand up like the Christians in the New Testament and resist false doctrine being taught from that platform or from any of those publications, not only are they not good, they're much worse than you might have ever even considered. And that's probably true with most people. So the very idea that you would hold any human, whether it's me, you, Hal, Nelson, the governing body, anyone, your grandmother, I don't care who they are, what they know, none, not your mother, not my mother, not no one's mother, father, sister, brother, anyone. Why do you call me good? That's the master. Do you not understand that? How dare you try to look at people and hold them up as some kind of example just because they seem nice? And are you crazy? No one is good, especially if they support the Watchtower. Understood. Not everybody is as culpable as the other, because it varies, right? Hal is definitely not ignorant, and neither was Nelson, and neither are the governing body, and neither am I. Who's doing the right thing among those people I just named? Exactly. So we don't need to hear these names. You don't need to even be using my name unless you want to just refer to the things I've said and say, hey, this guy, well, yeah, I get that. None of us are good. None of us. So you got to stop that right now. That's a trap. That's what's keeping you enthralled to the governing body. While they lie to you and tell you you're this group that you're not. If that's what you want to believe that, go ahead. We're not going to believe that. So you're just wasting your time. You should be supporting them and doing what they say and not bothering us. We're past all that. You're just getting further behind, though. If you end up, who knows what's going to happen. Like I've said, just because people seem spiritual now, when they realize the Watchtower is dead, that it's literally just not what it has been saying, like we've been telling everybody, when many others see this, as they continue to see this, it's unfortunate. Right? We're the ones trying to help all these people, right? Whether it's Trinitarians, Watchtower people, others, and yet they look at us like we're the devil, right? Watchtower people think of us as like apostates, like the worst you can imagine. And we're here promoting one God, the Father, the divine name. Everything they say only they do, which is not true. Like I was just saying, they don't care. To them, it's like a competition, right? It's like, how dare you? How dare you promote one God the Father apart from us? How dare you use the divine name and you're not here telling others to follow our false doctrine also? What? You think you apply the golden rule? Do you believe in 1914? Apostate, right? Forget the golden rule. Forget one God the Father. Jesus is the Messiah, firstborn, sent from heaven. Do you accept the governing body as representing God and Jesus on earth today? And essentially that God and Jesus trust them completely? Do you accept that? You don't? I'm never talking to you again. You're a bad person, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute. These guys are crazy. These guys are perverts, right? Or at least false teachers. I mean, some of them are nice. Again, I'm not saying we or others aren't nice or try our best to be representative of good qualities that God and Jesus show. None of us are good. This is fundamental. If you can't accept this and follow it through, right, and then they can't, ask them next time. Anytime they want to talk to you about Watchtower, anything, you should be with us, all this stuff, right? Oh, yeah, no, we're doing it worldwide. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Is the governing body good? So they're either going to say, no, only God is good, in which case you say, that's right. So I follow God, and I will work with them if they're doing things right. If they say they're good, which usually they do, that's a problem, wouldn't you say? Start right there. If you can't get past that simple, clear teaching that they themselves use against Trinitarians, no one is good but God. If they answer that question, let me ask you a question. We'll talk about 1914, all that in a minute. First, let me ask you this question. Number one, right? I'm telling you, try this. Number one, to any Watchtower person that wants to talk about their false doctrine. Hey, one question first, and then we'll talk about all that stuff. Is anyone on the governing body good? Would you consider any of them good? Like a good person? If they say yes, that's a problem. That's a problem. I've had people tell me, right, I'm talking, this is in a religious context, right? It's not like we're not talking about someone who might mistakenly think, well, we need to understand that their mentality, when they answer that question, they're not just thinking, well, a nice person. That would be a good thing about anyone, right? You could say someone's good way beyond how they would see the governing body as good. Jehovah's Witnesses see the governing body as good in a totally different way, I will argue, right? They see them as almost incapable of failing. It's kind of strange because they also know they fail at times, or they're capable of that, like with Ray Franz or others. They'll see them as like falling away, apostate. So in one sense, they see it as possible. Oh, thank you very much for the super chats, by the way. Who do we have here? Single Cell Organism 13 on fire. Well, hopefully you meant to give me 220s like that. If you did, thank you very much. If you have any questions or anything, I do appreciate that. We don't do this for money, but I do appreciate it. I know it's a sign that you appreciate it. And so I'm thankful. I'm not ungrateful. I just don't look to you for those things. I do this because I know, like you, we're passionate, right? I care about Watchtower people. I care about Trinitarians. Now, I don't like it when they refer to me as heretics or apostate, but I understand. They're just kind of, at least that's how I see it, as them just trapped in this system where they have to see us that way. They start to see us as like biblical. Well, that's not going to work, right? How's a Trinitarian going to see us as biblical when they've been condemning people who think like us for, almost 2,000 years? So it's just not going to happen. There'd have to be a radical transformation or attitude adjustment in terms of how we view others who disagree with us metaphysically in that way. Watchtower people, same thing, right? There's so much hate and anger in their thinking that we would dare be apart from them. Because they can't do it, right? That's really the issue. The thing with Watchtower, it's a little bit different with Trinitarians and the things, because they see us as like inferior to them, right? Even though if you point out, hey, it's word for word the Bible, and even the people you've been arguing with for almost 2,000 years, they teach that. Either way, Watchtower people are like, and we'll get to our show. We're gonna Angels of Jah. Oh, finish it up. Coming up right now. Finish this thought though. We got off. It happens. With the Watchtower people, and the way they see us, right? My impression I get from the people I know who rejected me as someone who, on my own or with others like you, do things that they tend to think of as exclusively in their purview, right? That they alone do, which is not true, and what they do is uniquely not always good. Like we've been talking about some things, right? We've all agreed that the Watchtower has done many good things in ways that represent what the Bible teaches. That does not, Trinitarians have too, that does not justify everything they do or teach. So we have to be careful. We have to try to look at what is connected with the Bible in spite of historical events that make it difficult for us to work together. But with Watchtower people, I'll finish this thought, it's very hard for them because they don't think they can do this. Trinitarians are more capable of standing on their own, it seems to me. There's still a communal reliance in some way and in a historical kind of association they cling to, but they seem more capable of surviving spiritually apart from like a specified group. Whereas a lot of Watchtower people, right, this is very important for them. They wouldn't be able to do it. If they couldn't follow the Watchtower program, a lot of people wouldn't probably do anything. I've seen it happen, so I'm not speaking speculatively in this regard entirely. But many people would and do. But I'm just saying, I think but all of them will look at us as evil. And yet here we are standing on our own, not having all the advantages that they have in terms of numbers, groups, all this stuff over time, right? Eventually, we'll see. Here we are doing the best we can to try to champion the clearest teachings of the Bible, which basically agree with their teachings other than all the other stuff. It's not in the Bible. And they can't stand us, right? It's like they just absolutely will not accept what we say, and many of them don't listen to us when we try to warn them, hey, these guys are lying to you. They've been telling you these things that are not true. Yes, we know it looks in many ways good and is, but in many ways it looks and isn't good. It looks bad and is bad, I should say. So why don't you look at that, right? Why are you ignoring all this stuff? Well, we know it's easier. It's more convenient. You don't have to then be at odds with your family and others like we did. So the fact is we have gone through more than you have. You are not willing, whether we're right or wrong, you're clearly not willing at this point, based on the evidence, to stop supporting these people. If you're in Watchtower, fine. Well, we don't think we have to support them. And part of our way of not supporting them is to study the Bible and use either the New World Translation or other translations, our own translations, and to not add to what it says. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to finalize our study of the Angels of Jah in Genesis, and we're going to read what it says. We're not going to look at it in light of Watchtower teaching, Trinitarian teaching, so it's none of that. What does the Bible teach? Right? What does the Bible teach, and what are the documents we have from biblical times tell us about these teachings that we can show are consistent with it? That's it. That's what we're here fundamentally to do. So we've been looking at all these texts in Genesis at this point. We start with Genesis 1. I'm not going to do a full review because I've done this in several videos prior. But we've seen a lot, haven't we? We've seen the angels of Jah, the sons of God, gods, according to text we reviewed earlier in this series. All of those descriptions are applicable to these beings. So how much more so then would it apply to Jesus as one who's singled out among the sons of God in this special way? We've been talking about how these angels speak for God, as God, but yet are explicitly described as angels. And we have accounts like in Acts 6 and Acts 7 in the New Testament that refer back to accounts like we'll read in our next series on the angels of Jah in Exodus, where it says that it was God, and in Acts 7 says it was angels. So, what does this mean? Right, well, we have, in using the Bible and text in the Bible, right? So reading Genesis and then other texts with it that complement it, like in Psalms and Job, that speak about the same subject, which is part of what we've done. We have been able to identify these as individual beings, sons of God. There's nothing that talks about them as sharing the divine nature, as having some unique relationship with each other that would not define them as they were accepted otherwise, and in every instance in which they are presented as individual beings. These angels speak for and as God on earth and in heaven. And yet we're also told no one has seen God at any time. So the conclusion of all of this evidence to us has been that these angels are God's sons. They've been with him since the creation of the heavens and the earth in Genesis 1, described also in Psalm 8 and Job 38, that show that these sons of God were there when God created all things, using his firstborn son, as we learn elsewhere in the Bible, in the Old and New Testament, Proverbs 8, Micah 5, Colossians 1, John 1, Revelation 3, that associate. So we have this association of God, the sons of God, and the firstborn. All of them are presented together in cosmological accounts in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. This is our teaching. It's very similar to Watchtower's teaching and to other groups in the past teaching with respect to how angels are viewed, maybe not as explicit as the way we're defining it. And I think we have gone beyond many groups in our explanation of texts and association of texts that discuss the cosmology and metaphysics of these accounts and beings. Whether it's in my writings or my videos, I'm pretty confident that we have explored all of the depths of texts, or most of them, that have a relationship with the Bible, that were written during the period of the Bible, or that are in the books of the Bible that we accept today. So we have this kind of view, this association of evidence that give us this look into these beings and the things they do, whether it's Satan, Jesus, the other sons of God, right? We saw in Genesis 6 that sons of God who were not humans, we prove that from the context, took human women. So there's a lot of things they can do. We saw Satan take the form of a serpent. We saw cherubim referenced after Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden, associated with fire, a fiery sword. We've seen angels speaking from heaven as God, and yet be identified explicitly, as I said, as angels. Well, what does this mean again? Okay, this is our view. This is how we interpret even New Testament texts, like Acts 7 does, using the Old Testament, and why we associate Jesus with Michael the Archangel, many of us. I happen to believe he's Michael the Archangel, the Prince of Israel, right? The angel of Jah, whom we've been reading about in many of these accounts in Genesis and in Zechariah, and that we'll be reading about again in Exodus. So if it's so clear and we have all these accounts that describe angels in these ways, speaking for and as Ja'ol, why do we have such controversy, specifically with Trinitarians, right? We have controversy with non-Trinitarian groups like Socinians and Muslims because of pre-existence issues. They're a little bit different than the substance of these accounts where we're talking about angels in a pre-Jesus setting, right? So this is going to be more applicable to our discussions with Trinitarians because unless we're going to simultaneously prove Jesus is one of these angels, which we can do and I'm talking about, but with Trinitarians, we don't need to do that in large part because they see him as this angel or the angel of Ja'ol. They don't see him as Michael, though. Okay, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Trinitarians will say, many of them, right? This is where it gets kind of weird. We talked about this, but I'm going to bring it up now before we get to our first account. And really, we have one main account involving the angels of Jah in Genesis. Well, two. And then we have a few other accounts that relate to Trinitarian issues that we're going to get to. I think you'll enjoy. But let me just state it this way, okay? Right? Trinitarians want us to believe that there is no way, impossible, that Jesus can be a creature and an angel. In fact, they regularly will say, you believe he's just an angel. You believe he's a mere creature, right? Misrepresents our view completely. And they use pejorative senses for those terms in ways that the Bible doesn't use for perfect, sinless beings. In fact, Revelation 5, which Trinitarians often misuse and misapply, presents a creature, the slaughtered lamb, as perfectly capable of opening the scrolls because he was sinless. He was slaughtered with no sin. That's a repeated theme throughout the New Testament. In fact, that's why he's so special. So the idea that being a creature somehow invalidates him from being honored and worshipped in these ways, similar to how other beings are honored and worshipped, like we're going to see tonight, and we've shown previously, is ridiculous. Why? You don't need the Trinity to explain all this. You need the Bible, right? If you use the Bible and biblical texts, biblically related texts, all of this makes sense. You don't have to import later views. And I was thinking too, a lot of what Trinitarians, briefly, real quickly, I've noticed recently a lot of people arguing about the cross, the stake, and all these things, and I have several videos. That's where I've noticed it. I think some people are forgetting the reason many Trinitarians really can't let go of the cross is Constantine, right? Because it's associated with his vision, his dream. And it's not going to be something they're just going to surrender to you because you can show that there's this potential that he was killed on something other than a cross. Try to remember that. Either way, getting back to the angels of Ja'ol, so Trinitarians are going to try to tell us there's no way. Can't be a creature, can't be an angel. They'll often use Hebrews 1 that says, to which of the angels did he ever say, you are my son, etc. Now, I've done videos on every text from Hebrews 1 through Hebrews 2, explaining very clearly, as those texts teach, that has to do with Jesus living and dying as a man and being resurrected. He was not an angel during that time. As we have repeatedly explained, and as the Bible clearly teaches in Hebrews 2, Jesus became lower than the angels, gods. It's a quotation from Psalm 8. We've talked about it earlier in this series. I've talked about it separately as well. I've written about it. In the Hebrew, it says Elohim. In the Greek translation, it says angels. And then it's quoted in Hebrews 2 as angels. So they're gods. These are who they're identified as throughout the Bible. Sons of God are gods. Even Jesus' application of Psalm 82 and John 10 proves that as well. In answer to the question of how he can be called a god. The whole point of him quoting that account. I get Trinitarians sometimes saying, well, no, he's saying he's calling them gods. Right? It's just so ridiculous. No. He says if he called them gods, whom God came against, why do you get so upset that I say I'm a son of God? Right? Literally using the very terms I've been explaining to you mean these very things that they accused him of being. And then you argue with us about what they mean. It gets really strange. But like I said, remember earlier, when you try to make your doctrine fit, it's much more difficult. When you just believe what the texts clearly teach, or can be shown to teach within the context of those texts, and you don't usually have any problems. Not that I can see. I don't see any problems with these texts. They seem pretty clear to me. I mean, where there is a little lack of clarity, you can make it clear. But with Trinitarians here, right, that want to use that text and say, to which of the angels did he say? Well, right, he became lower than the angels. So he didn't say it to any angel. He was not an angel as a man. He's still the same person who was, in our view, the angel of the Lord, or the archangel Michael, the word, wisdom, but he's a man. And this is where I was getting at earlier with the people that asked me, well, how can you say he's calling himself a god like the sons of God who are spirits if he's saying it as a man? Well, because he's often, like I said, and like I just quoted from, he's frequently referring back to his pre-human life while he's a man. So, I don't know how much more clear or what it's going to take for some people to see this. Again, I think it's more just their doctrine. It won't fit. So it seems more difficult than it is. No problem here. I see it clear. But if you don't, then, good for you. So, Trinitarians will try to tell us this, ignoring that it's talking about him as a man, not saying this to one of the angels, but to, again, a man who became lower than. It even says that in the immediate context, Hebrews 2. So we understand these accounts. Hebrews 1 and 2 are very clear to us. We're not confused at all. Are Trinitarians confused? Is that what I'm saying? Well, you tell me, okay? Because what would you say is the case with someone who will quote a text, from Hebrews 1, and say here where it says, to which of the angels did he ever say, you are my son, today have become your father? Who's it talking about there? Oh, Jesus, right? So is he an angel? No, it says to which of the angels? It's rhetorical, right? It's to none of them. Right, well, he wasn't an angel. He was a man. Okay. In their mind, it's proof can't be an angel. Most of those same Trinitarians, and probably all of them if it gets right down to it, will say he's this angel we've been reading about frequently in Genesis and in Zechariah and all throughout the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord. They see this as a special, uncreated person of the Trinity angel. In fact, as we've shown in our readings of Genesis, they basically believe that the three angels of Genesis 18 and 19 are the Trinity, right? There's a manifestation of the Trinity, pre-incarnate, right? There's no real incarnation happening or true human taking in terms of the birth that Jesus had, which we would argue is different from an incarnation where they say he maintained his divinity, right? We believe he gave that up, right? He gave up the Marthe Theou and took on the form and appearance of a man, right? Again, lower than the angels. This is how much clearer does it have to be, everybody? I'm just quoting the text. I'm not adding anything to it. That's what Trinitarians do, right? All these things mean different things when the Trinitarians quote them, not me. They mean exactly what they say. That's it, right? So that's important to remember. So we get to this point where with Trinitarians, we're like, okay, well, do you believe he's an angel or not, right? Because we believe he's an angel. We don't believe Hebrews 1 and 2 contradicts that, but reinforces that at one point he wasn't, another point he was, that either way, right? Because if he wasn't lower than the angels at one point, if he became lower than the angels, he wasn't lower than the angels at one point. So where does that put him? Well, where he put himself with the other sons of God, right? So only he's sent forth, right? He's the only begotten. He's the firstborn. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So there's something special about him. He's still one of the sons of God, though. There's something special about every firstborn son. They're still one of the sons of their father, though. So it's important that we present that, and Trinitarians understand that, but they often forget that and misrepresent that and say, we believe he's a mere creature. He's just an angel. No, we believe he's the firstborn. He's the slaughtered lamb who was sinless. Yeah, in a creature. Revelation 5, all of it. Firstborn. So we believe he's Michael the archangel, or at least an archangel, 1 Thessalonians 4, right? So he's not just an angel even. Why do you guys say that? Right? And we can make the case, and I've made the case, and it looks like Jude is making the case, that the angel of the Lord is Michael. He's the Prince of Israel. He's the one Jude said was arguing with Satan over Moses' body. We'll get to that as well. You know, we allow for people to have their own views on that, but they want us to believe these things, right? It gets to the point where it's like, well, no one knows what they're talking about, and everything they're talking about has these special meanings. Angel can't mean angel when it's applying to who they say is a person of the Trinity. And the Bible never even talks about a person of the Trinity or defines an angel in that way. So we have to have all these special meanings and understandings brought into these words before we can understand any of these things, right? That's what you're basically saying. That's ridiculous. We can just read these accounts without ever having read anything related to the Trinity, and they'll make perfect sense to us, right? The second we start redefining all these things from what they were culturally, historically shown to mean, just nonstop problems. All right, so let's bring up the angels of Jah. We're going to go to the Bible Hub, and we're going to show that when the Bible describes these angels in these ways, and tonight's a significant account. As I mentioned, we only have a couple accounts we're going to review, but they are significant. Go ahead and bring up the Bible Hub, and then I'll bring you guys up. We'll read. I also have the bread and wine, right? We're going to partake. We do that at every Christian Witnesses of Jah show. So we've been going for a little while here. Got a little pumped up there. We did a little longer pre-show. But, you know, when we get together and have time together, I like to talk about things that are important to us. Right? It is a series. We're wrapping it up. It's the shortest one, though, in terms of the content. So I wanted to go a little more. You'll see. So let's get to it. Bring up Genesis, the Bible Hub. Bring up also what we'll be reviewing. Okay. We try to keep this right around 2 hours. We've been going about an hour. I think we'll be able to wrap it up within that time. So we're going to get right to our reading now here. Thank you all for joining me. Good to see you all again. Let's see. That right. Put you guys right there. Okay. So the first text we're going to go to. Let's go to Genesis 48. Right, we had someone bring this up last time. Like, I want to get to Genesis 48. I was like, I know. I tried to break this up in ways that would make it convenient for us to talk about the text and give enough detail, you know, so we could get the most out of them. And also spend a little time together like we just did. So let's take a look, though. Genesis 48. Let's take a look at Genesis 48. We'll start in verse 13. What do we got here? Let me see. Can I make this a little bit better? We'd like to bring up the multi, especially tonight. We're going to be looking at some of the Greek because of its relationship with the New Testament in Greek. We'll be highlighting a few corresponding terms. See, I want to bring up the multi. There. Sometimes you have to adjust it, as I've mentioned. There we go. that the best? I think that's probably our best view. All right, so we're gonna use the NIV primarily because it's the one at the top, and across from it we have an older version of the Septuagint, still usually very correct and accurate. Sweet Septuagint. We have other texts below as well. Hebrew, English, if we need to. I'm sure we will. Let's start here though. Genesis 48:13. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. Verse 14, but Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. We'll get to this more in a moment, this whole firstborn thing. Verse 15. Then he blessed Joseph, this is Jacob, and said, may the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day. Verse 16. The angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless the boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly upon the earth. All right. Now, I'm sure some things stood out to you there. We've talked about this text before. I've done a video called, I believe it was the Angel of Jah in Exodus. The Angel of Jah in the Old Testament. It was kind of like an early, small version of what we're doing now. We're really getting into it now, like a really extended, expanded look into each book of the Bible's presentation of these angels. But I did a video a couple years ago, a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, where I looked at a lot of these texts. This was one of them. I looked at a lot of different Old Testament texts to show that this angel, right, that we'll talk more about in our next series on the Angels of Jah in Exodus, this angel's been given special ability and power and representation. All right, so now let's go back, right, just to the prior verse at least. So this is Jacob talking. We're not talking about the firstborn stuff right now. We're talking about the angels. Right? This is the big account in our final part in this series where the angels of Jah are explicitly featured, okay? This is really the primary account and one related account from chapter 49. Jacob is talking, and he says, may the God, right? In the Greek, we can see right here, ha theos. And in the Hebrew right here, ha Elohim. May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully. The God, once again. Now here in the Septuagint, you can see, of course, NIV is translating the Hebrew most of the time, right? It seems. Here you can see the Greek has ha-kyrios. And if we go, you can see the Hebrew again has ha Elohim, just like it had previously. So NIV is consistent with the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day. A shepherd there, correspondingly also good fit with Jesus in the New Testament. But to have that, right, for Trinitarians to have Jesus as this shepherd connection with God, Trinitarians often make this connection. They'll often say, well, God is the shepherd. He's prophesied to be the shepherd who will gather people and do these things in the future. Even in the accounts in Genesis, it talks about, as we're reading here, God is the shepherd. But to get to that, you're going to have to say he's an angel, right? Unless you're going to make a separation that Jacob is somehow calling on God and the angel who's been there with them, that there's been more than one angel. That's been explicitly stated to us. And even Trinitarians agree, but that's clear. You have two angels that go visit Lot, right? One stays. And so you have very clearly more than one there, at least three in several accounts. But one is often singled out. We see this even in Zechariah, right? We saw one angel really singled out, right? One angel, seemed to interact with Satan more than the other, just like Jude presents Michael interacting with Satan more. But there was another angel who came from God in Zechariah, in our series there, and met with the primary angel who was with Zechariah, and started to give him, new words that he had received and telling them things they didn't know, which proving again, no Trinity, but, past that. So nevertheless, there's one angel, and it's really featured. And this is, again, consistent with our view that Michael, the archangel, is special. Okay? That's the whole point, Trinitarians. He's unique. The archangel. He's the only one explicitly identified by name as the archangel. Jesus is called an archangel in 1 Thessalonians 4, but still, if Jesus isn't Michael, okay, well then you have two. But it can mean ruler of the angels in with respect to the authority they're given at different times. Or it can mean chief angel, right? So this special, this chiefness, this angelos, that is consistent with this whole, specialization of an angel in and amongst other angels, all of whom are acting in a very special capacity because they're speaking for God. They're speaking as God. Even when they're speaking to each other, they're speaking as God because they're the words from God the angel is speaking, just like Revelation 1:1. It's a revelation from God, right? That he gives to Jesus. And then Jesus gives it to his angels because he's the archangel. He's the ruler of those angels. If he was God in the ultimate sense, there'd be no point in it saying God gave him the revelation. He's in heaven. Trinitarians, you can cut it out with the whole his humanity in heaven is somehow limiting him in these ways and allowing this to happen. Knock it off. We've disproven that in the first place. And in the second place, it's just ridiculous. This is just later doctrine, Council of Chalcedon, right? 5th century Trinitarian metaphysics stuff, not even earliest Trinity stuff. But you guys need it to support the Trinity, or there's no Trinity, right? It's game over. And it's game over anyway. So we can stop playing whenever you want. Try to help people, work it out. You want to believe in Trinity. If you have to believe in Trinity, can you stop bothering us? Okay, we'll let you believe in Trinity, as long as you don't contradict one God the Father, no Trinity. Okay, right here though, ha angelos. Boom, right? We know. Same Hebrew, ha malach, the angel. Okay, so with Trinitarians at this point, in the same way that I said earlier, that when you talk to a Watchtower person, the first thing I want you to do is to ask them, look, okay, we'll talk about all that stuff in a minute. Is anyone on the governing body good? And then see what they say and go from there. Same with you guys in a different way. From now on, everybody, Watchtower, all non-Trinity people, I'm going to suggest that the very first thing you do with the person you're talking to is ask them, do you believe Jesus is the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament or not? Okay. If they say yes, then they cannot use Hebrews 1 against you. It's over, right? At that point, if they bring that up, you can immediately say, hey, wait a minute. You just said he was this angel. Now you're saying he can't be an angel. What are you talking about? No Trinity. And of course, we have the text in Isaiah 9 that also translates God as an angel, like Elohim in Psalm 85. So, this was very well understood by Jews of that time. They recognized when an El or an Elohim was an angelos or an angeloi. You Trinitarians can't seem to figure it out, though. They're all sons of God, like we've been proving. All these texts have been showing and proving. And so here we have the angel being referred to by Jacob, either in the sense in which he has identified himself as absolutely representing and speaking for the God who sent him, or as an associate, right? He's talking about God blessing him and the angel blessing him. Either way, they're on the same level in terms of Jacob recognizing them and their involvement with what has happened and wanting them to bless the boys as he's doing right now. Trinitarians do not present this information to people. They don't say, again, remember what I said earlier, everybody? And everybody knows. They regularly present to us that we say Jesus is a mere angel. He's just an angel. What are you talking about, right? Ron Rhodes, he says that in his book. Just a creature. Just think he's an angel, right? No, try archangel. And, this whole idea that being just a mere creature, you guys are just lying to people, right? Like I said, with Hebrews 1 and Revelation 5. Both of those prove you're wrong. So, and the text from the Old Testament, which is why we need to start, right? Do you believe he's the angel of the Lord or not? You do believe he's the angel of the Lord. So you believe he's an angel. Even if you believe he's an uncreated Jehovah, person of the Trinity angel, you believe he's an angel. Right now, okay, now watch out. If they say yes, then they can't use Hebrews 1. Okay, that's gone. And then from there, you just show that, no, this angel's Michael and clearly not God. He just speaks for God. And this is how angels are actually described. This is really the key point, everyone. See, because Trinitarians fail to present the teaching about angels, sons of God in the Bible, we get caught up in this whole whether Jesus is God argument or not, so much so that we fail to do what we're doing now, to present the proper context of the Bible and say, hey, no, you guys are minimizing these angels and their role and representation as sons of God in the Bible. So when we get to Jesus and we try to tell you, yeah, he's not just one of those, but he's like the most special one, okay? And yeah, it is okay to be a creature and to be honored and worshiped in one sense, like 1 Chronicles 29:20, putting someone next to God in a way, like this angel's put next to God in a way that doesn't make them God in the same way that God is God, one God the Father. No, God is not an angel. He doesn't deliver a message for someone else to someone else. That never happens. Sorry, Trinitarians, it doesn't happen. Anytime God speaks and sends an angel, that's not God, it's his angel. Nothing in the Bible allows for another application of angel than as a separate individual being. So you don't have any basis for applying it any other way than to an individual being. And there's no humanity here anywhere in the Old Testament. So it's over. All the sons of God are individual beings. Whether gods or angels, they're separate individual beings. They're presented that way. They're described that way. You have something totally different, okay? And everything we're saying fits. God's got a special son. He's got a special angel. They're all identified in the same ways in these accounts. And one stands out. And that one is the archangel. It's Michael. Or at very least, Jesus in the pre-incarnate state that's very similar to Michael. He's separate from them. He can argue with Satan. He's still an angel, though. Even as the prophesied Son of God, he's an angel. Isaiah 9:6. You refer to it often as him as the mighty God. Well, it's as a child, though. See, he's called that because that's who he's, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not necessarily only calling him a mighty God or an angel. Well, you could do so in a Mosaic sense, like Exodus does. In one sense, right? You can be an angel and be a human messenger, but and for not talking about a human, strictly human sense, and granted, maybe you could say Isaiah 9 is, the fact is, combined with everything else, that clearly can't be all it's talking about, right? Because again, Jesus doesn't limit his angelic or divine nature to being a human. He frequently casts it way back to before he became a man. So he has to be more than what he became when he was lower than the angels. Otherwise, there's no becoming lower than Trinitarians or Socinians, especially Socinians here. There's no lower than in Hebrews 2 unless you were something else prior to becoming lower than the angels, just like Hebrews 2. So thus ends the whole Socinian fantasy and false doctrine, right? Really blasphemy, denying the explicit teaching of the preexistence of the Son of God. You should be ashamed of yourself, Carlos, and Anthony Buzzard, and you have no arguments left anyway. So, got shame all over the place. Now, we have right here a clear association with the angel and God, just like we have had all throughout the book of Genesis through this point. And we're at the end, everybody. So our view of Jesus is acting basically in the same way, only now with more authority, right? That's the whole point, Trinitarians. That's what we're telling you. This is not something new in the sense that it's so unusual. The only thing that can explain it is Trinity. Like we have to somehow wait several hundred years after all these events to figure out, well, how could this all happen? Oh, well, there's the way it can happen is God has a bunch of sons, and he has a firstborn one. And, they do things or don't do things, and then based on what they do, he gives them more authority, and they act for him. All right here, very clear. Even Jesus himself refers back to it, no Trinity, right? So we have in this case, Genesis 48, an absolute association with God and the angel in Jacob's request for a blessing, right? Really incredible stuff. So I want you guys to just think about that for a moment. I'm going to use the restroom really quick, okay? I'll be right back. Got Dada right outside the door there. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I'll drink right there. We'll wrap this up here. So it's good too to reflect on that. So if Trinitarians say, in answer, like I said earlier, if you ask, is Jesus the angel of the Lord? If they say yes, well then again, like I said, they can't use Hebrews 1, or you should be able to easily show they're contradicting themselves. If they say no, right? If a Trinitarian says, no, Jesus is not the angel of the Lord, and proceeds to use Hebrews 1, that's when you use Isaiah 9, 5, 6, right? Where you can show the Septuagint translates God as angel there about the future Messiah. And that was used all throughout the early church and is accepted as part of the Septuagint and a legitimate translation of El. So you can point out, well, no, Jesus is he's a special angel. He's the angel of great counsel. He's the archangel. It's a special kind of angel here, everybody. So if anyone tells you, hey, you just mere angel, no, you're just lying or misinformed, unfortunately. And you probably also believe he's a special angel. Just the way you believe he's special isn't in the Bible. The way we believe he's special, yeah, that's in the Bible right here, like all over the place. So, if an angel in Genesis, as we've seen not only here, but in prior videos earlier, if an angel can be spoken of this way, what is so unusual about how Jesus is presented? It just, to me, is so, the more I read in the Old Testament and how these beings are presented, and the sons of God are speak for God, and how Acts 7 says that many of these accounts where it's like God says this, that it's angels, right? It's just so clear that they understood exactly what we're seeing right here. This is just how they are. This is not unusual that everything in the New Testament, the way Jesus talks, the way he's spoken to, the way he's addressed, it's not unusual at all. But when people aren't informed, right, when they're not told that, hey, this is all, look at all this stuff that's going on with these sons of God throughout the Old Testament. Jesus is like one of these sons of God, but a special one. What are you guys not understanding? Why do you need Trinity to make sense of this? You don't. So how about we just leave it, let it go, right? Why don't we not use homoousios? Is that in the Bible? Oh, okay. It comes later, few hundred years, pagan emperor. How about we let that go? Yeah, we can use these accounts right here. We don't need homoousios. All right, let's take a look now at a related account. Genesis 49. Okay, so we have this account, very clear. Jacob, identifying or putting on parallel terms when it comes to a blessing, God and the angel. So Genesis 49, let's take a look at 21. Genesis 49, 21. Now, again, Trinitarians, people like Sam and others, they're going to tell you that this is the Trinity, right? That these angels, all this stuff. So this is where you need to make it clear. It should be easier, even than terms like God, to show that there is no such thing as a uncreated angel. That's not anywhere explained or presented in the Bible. That's just an invention. The Bible teaches in the Old New Testament that God makes angels spirits. It's it. It's over. There's no exception. If you want to create an exception without any evidence, okay, well, that's what you're doing. You don't have evidence that there's an exception, and you're just saying there's an exception. That's not evidence, okay? That's begging the question. If we can show you a text, God makes his angels spirits. Okay, that's evidence. You don't have a text that says there's an uncreated angel. All you have are texts that show angels speaking for and as God, that are all created. But that's okay because, they're like his sons and they're speaking for him. It's just what they do. It's not unusual, as we've been proving. What's unusual is that you try to force a later doctrine onto these texts and we're required to believe it, or we're heretics. That's what's unusual. All right, Genesis 49, 21. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. This is Jacob, right, giving his blessings to his sons before he dies. Verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. because of your Father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you with the blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb, right? So remember what we read earlier from Genesis 48, verses 13 through 16, how Jacob was asking God and the angel, or the angel as God, to bless the boy, because Jacob recognized that God was using this angel, that effectively this angel was able to do exactly what God allowed him to do, as if it were him, just like we see all the way through. This has been happening. This is not the first time, everybody. This is like a continuation of what we've been seeing. So in Jacob's mind, though, right, it really all still goes back to God. But the angel is involved. Like we read previously in several parts of the series, no one has seen God at any time. And no one has even heard the Father, I would argue. So it's these angels, right? Whether it's the angels in Genesis 18 and 19 who go on to say they've been sent by Jah, or whether it's the angels going up and down Jacob's ladder, or stairway, as I think is better translation, right? It said Yah was above it. It never said he was coming down the stairway, but it said the angels kept coming up and down the stairway. And one of those angels also wrestled with Jacob, right? Or at least it said he contended with God, or a God. But the angels are the ones coming up, up and down the ladder. And it said in that same account where he contended with God, or a God, there was a man. And that's just like what we read in Genesis 18 and 19 and elsewhere, and in Zechariah, and in Daniel. They're described as men at times, but they're angels. The accounts all explicitly identify them as angels, not necessarily the one where he contends with God or a God, but it's a man, so someone, it's being seen. And we, as I explained, have accounts that describe the angels as coming up and down the stairway, not God. Still, the association is so close, it makes perfect sense with everything we teach and believe about Jesus in the New Testament, and that Jesus himself teaches, right? He tells us in John 14, hey, why do you keep asking about the Father? I'm literally telling you exactly what I heard from him. He taught me these things. He's in me right now telling me what to say. How is that any different from all of these accounts involving these angels? This is exactly the same thing. Only he's the special son doing what they do. But when Trinitarians see that, they freak out. It's got to be God. He's got to be a person of the Trinity. No, he's just one of these angels, the sons of God. Even you say, most of you, that he's one of these angels. But you redefine all this stuff we talked about. You see what I'm saying? On the one hand, they act like this is so unusual. There's got to be like, we got a new doctrine. Or we need homoousios, Trinity, right? We got Jesus being presented in such a unique way. It's got to be God here. No, you know what? It's like actually very similar, if not identical in many cases, with exactly how these sons of God are presented in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Revelation 21:22. Doing the exact same type of things, talking for God and Jesus, right? So there's no change. The only change is that the Son of God became lower than these angels and died as a man. That's the change right there. That's the difference. That's the Revelation 5 difference. It doesn't mean he's not a creature difference. Now, I think this has all been pretty clear, don't you? That these angels and these accounts are not God. They're not Jehovah. They're God's sons. They're gods by nature in terms of being spirit sons of the one God, the Father. Just like 1 Corinthians 8, 4 through 6 says. There's no God but one. Whether there are gods in heaven or on earth, just as there are those who are called gods, it's just there are many gods and many lords. But to us, there's one God, the Father, right? It's all right there. Both the denial, the acceptance, and the doctrine. All three. The same things you read in Isaiah. They're all right there in 1 Corinthians 8, 4 through 6. There are no other gods. Even though there are gods, these sons of God, those are gods, right? We see them all over the place. They're called gods, sons of God, angels. There's no other gods. There's no like all these idols, and those aren't gods, carved image. Well, no. To us, one God, Father. All these angels, when they're not acting as their own gods, unless it's say this is acting as God right here. You see all these accounts? Boom. Just like Jesus. No one more so than him, in fact. Now, that was a great series, I think. I'll look forward to our time in the book of Exodus in a few months. But let's take a look at a couple other accounts real quickly on some other things related to the subject of Trinity, angels, and subjects that come up. All right, so let's go back to Genesis 49:3. Remember we talked about firstborn? We talked about how Jacob was putting the hand on Ephraim and Manasseh, one being the younger and one being the firstborn, the older. So even though the firstborn didn't receive the blessing, they were still differentiated in terms of whether they were actually firstborn, that is, younger or older. So how these terms are used, we have a whole video on it and related to the use of firstborn in the Bible. Here in Genesis 49:3, Jacob is once again giving his final blessings. And he says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength. Right? That's exactly what basically Deuteronomy 21:17 says, right? That we use all the time, that the firstborn is the beginning of one's generative power, or the beginning of one's children, which is just like it says here. It means the same thing. When it says beginning of his power in the Hebrew, that's what it means. Power, it's talking about your offspring, your lineage, the start of that. That's why Jesus is the start. He's the beginning. He's the firstborn. Literally, he's not presented figuratively as the firstborn. No. Not like David or others. Those are figurative, even by the very word used, placed as. Right? Beginning of my children. Protatakos. RK. Right, so it's not just Deuteronomy 21:17, everybody. Firstborn is presented and defined in the Bible multiple times, in addition to being predominantly used apart from a couple figurative uses, which themselves are also to temporal beings, never to God. Firstborn means firstborn, the start, the beginning, the very term used of both Proverbs and Jesus in the New Testament, wisdom in Proverbs 8 and Jesus in the New Testament. RK, the beginning, the first. Whether it's firstborn or RK, they mean basically the same thing. You're the start. You're the first one. So don't forget that text also. Let's look at Genesis 49:26, just a couple texts here as we wrap it up, everyone. We finished our reading regarding the angels of Jah in Genesis. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to partake in just a few moments, but we're going to share a couple more texts here that I found in reading this final part of Genesis that I wanted to share. This one on eternal, right, often comes up with Trinitarians, olam, aionios in Greek. And so Here is another instance you can use to show that olam does not mean eternal. Genesis 49:26, your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains and the bounty of the age-old hills. And in the Hebrew, this is primarily for olam, right? So you can explain to Trinitarians that no, this is not talking about always eternal forever, right? These terms and descriptions do have a more limited application that Trinitarians just simply often do not accept. So you have to document it for them. So I want to share this for you guys here. Use of olam in Genesis 49:26. All right, now let's take a look at a couple of texts regarding proskuneo, right? Trinitarians love to say proskuneo, right? We have many examples, of course, that show no, it doesn't always mean worship in the ultimate sense, and most of the time does not. And even when beings are given the same worship at the same time by the same people with the same words as God, Solomon, 1 Chronicles 29:20, that does not make them God. But we do have to continue to show Trinitarians these things because they have a heart, they're misled, right? They're taught by people who say, hey, no, when they fall down to the ground and proskuneo, yeah, that means they're God. No, actually, that happens all throughout the Old Testament as well. It's another failure by Trinitarians to use the Bible to interpret itself, so we have to help them, right? Genesis 42:6, Joseph was the governor of all the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Prosek, inesan, auto, epiprosopan, epitengain. They bowed to him with their faces upon the earth, upon faces upon the earth. I couldn't get more explicit here. Yet Trinitarians continue to state that this would make Jesus God if it happens as it happens in the New Testament. No, you're just not reading the Bible again and in desperation mode, I guess. So you misapply how terms like proskuneo are used. Yes, we know you have other texts. We've been talking about them several times. Revelation 5, no, does not prove what you say it proves. That's a creature right there. It proves what we say it proves. Ha ha! Verse 26, Genesis 43, when Joseph came home, they presented to him gifts they had brought into the house. And they bowed down before him to the ground, Trinitarians. Prosekinesan, alto, epi prosopan, epitain gain, Trinitarians. When will you gain understanding? Verse 28, they replied, your servant, your father, is still alive and well. They bowed down, worshiping before him, Trinitarians. How about that? That right there. Even different wording than the prior accounts, and yet the same meaning, same impact that you say it would have, that they're God or that Jesus is God if it happens to him. No, what we're trying to help you understand is how the Bible provides a context, right? You often speak of this, right? One of your hermeneutical principles, context, interpreting things in context. And yet there's this ongoing failure to do so when it comes to what's next, your doctrine. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in. They threw themselves to the ground before him. Right? We don't get proskuneo used there, Trinitarians, but that's basically what's happening, right? We don't always need the word. If the process is clearly described, right? We have just not one time, almost as many uses in this one part of Genesis 42 through 49 than Jesus in the New Testament, right? And yet you guys make it seem like this is so unusual. How could anyone but God be worshipped, right? Well, that's because it's happening all the time and they're very familiar with it. Then Joseph, Genesis 48:12, then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. Kai prosek enesan auto epi prosopan epi tes gaze. Trinitarians, it's just nonstop, right? It's not once, not twice, not three times, not four times. Many times, right? This should be very clear to you. We shouldn't have to be arguing over these terms, proskuneo, or really any term, right? Because this is all what's given to Jesus after what, Trinitarians? He died, right? He was dead. He had to be recreated as a spirit, 1 Corinthians 15:45. He died and became a life-giving spirit. Genomai, right there, governs both terms, both descriptions. Adam and Jesus done, game over. He was created spirit a second time right there. Firstborn of all creation, then became a life-giving spirit, right? Because he died faithful. This is all throughout the New Testament text. Philippians 2, Colossians 1, Hebrews 1, Revelation 5. Because he died as a man, the slaughtered lamb, Trinitarian's creature. What you say he couldn't be if he were receiving all this and not God, he receives all this and is not God? No, because he's a creature. And you say he can't be God if he's a creature. So right there, right? Yeah, proven right there. Think about it. It's all happening. But here we have it happening, right? Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck. Your enemies, your father's sons will bow down to you. Right? It's part of the dream, which got him sold into slavery, but which ended up being true when he became governor of Egypt, right? And they came and bowed down before him, which we have right here being prophesied. Pros, gene, susin, soy, hoi, huioi, tu patrasu. So I think it's very clear what we have here, and that is that proskuneo is used all throughout Genesis and the Old Testament and the New Testament, ways that don't make them God. And it's very similar with Jesus, although he, again, is the firstborn, given all authority and power, so he's right next to God, but he's still a creature, right? Slaughtered lamb, Trinitarians. You're the ones who bring up Revelation 5, last text, Genesis 43, 23. This is similar to the example in Ruth, where she says, where it said, my people will be your people and my God, your God. Trinitarians often say when Jesus says in John 20, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, my God and your God, they make this ridiculous argument that somehow makes a difference, that he can still be a part of the Trinity and their God somehow be different, even though it's just one God the Father. Is odd. No, well, we have the same pattern of speech used in Ruth, in the book of Ruth, but we have it also used here in Genesis 43:23. It's already said, don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Okay, so your God, the God of your father, Hatheos, Himon, Kai, Hatheos, Ton, Pateron, Himon, the God of us, the God of you, and the God of your fathers. I'm sorry. Your God and the God of your fathers. Sometimes whenever I see Hugh, I always think of you, but then I got to remind myself. And it's a plural reference, right? And a possessive in this case. So you have here a difference, do you not? The main point being that the God of you and the God of your fathers, they're the same God. That doesn't make them different in any way. Neither does Jesus' statement in John 20:17 make his God and our God, or his Father and our Father, different in any way. It's a pattern of speech. Again, you Trinitarians sometimes, regardless of how often you teach, you just don't follow the Bible. You're trying to promote your doctrine. That's why you want everyone to go to your schools and have your education, regardless of any of our learning and education. You want it to be all this false doctrine, right? Unless we get a degree in your false doctrine, we're not accepted. Well, no. How about no? That's nowhere something we're told to aspire to in the Bible. And you guys make so many mistakes with how you use the Bible, you just don't apply it. Whether it's the angel of Jah, whether it's a use of terms like God or gods, whether it's speech patterns like my father and your father, your God, your father, use of terms like olam for non-eternal things like mountains, definitions of firstborn, uses of firstborn for only temporal things, whether figurative or non. Uses of terms like proskuneo for worship in ways that don't make a person God. You guys don't present any of this stuff, or barely any of it, when you present your arguments that it's all so unique when it comes to Jesus, or these terms are used to Jesus. Well, they may be unique in one sense when they have to do with Jesus, but they're really not unique in their overall sense of usage in the Bible and what they actually can and do mean. And especially when unique as Jesus, they still mean these things in these ways. They're just applied to him. They don't make him part of a trinity. They just mean that he is the one they're talking about. In this case, the firstborn, God's son, whom many of you even believe is an angel in the Old Testament in these accounts. Okay, well, God's not an angel, and the angels are made spirits. So you don't have any example of God being sent or delivering a message from someone else to someone else. That's obvious. We've called your bluff. It's over. So you can make these claims all you want. God's an angel. No, he's not. You're just lying again. The Bible never presents God as an angel. What it does present are angels speaking for and acting as God. That's our teaching. So it's what the Bible actually presents and says. That's why we believe it. Another reason why we do certain things like partake of the bread and wine are because we're told by the one who came and gave his life, the one who became lower than angels, proving at one time he was more than a man, because that's what he became when he was lower than something else. So one time, he wasn't lower than that something else. That's why Philippians 2 says he was existing in God's form, or in the form of a God. And then he emptied himself. Kanao. Doesn't mean limited. Sorry. I know Trinitarians say that. They just can't prove it. We can prove it means totally destroy and wipe out. Empty. Gone. Right? And then he took on humanity. That's how he became lower than the angels, because he emptied himself of the thing that made him not lower than the angels. His spirit body. The form of a God. Spirit. You know, God's a spirit. So his form is a spirit, is the form of a God. Same thing. We talk about it all the time. Bible's so simple and straightforward, isn't it, everybody? He set aside that spirit body, form of a God, took on the form of a man, gave it on our behalf. Last Adam, body and blood. That we might have life by means of him. So I thank you all for joining me. Let me just take a quick look here, see what's been happening. Patsy on fire. See what's going on here. A lot of activity. Terry, good to see you. Barnabas, very nice. George Lopez, good to see you. Betsy, Bankhead, 13 above. Very nice. Exile Reviews. Martyrs, Trinidad. Good to see you. Chris LaSala, very nice. Let's see what happened here. Triple-minded God of Athanasius. Yeah, well, we did get into, we kind of referred to that time frame tonight. We definitely did. Well, you know, we try to work with Trinitarians. It's not like we're against them entirely. We understand what's happened in many cases. But a lot of them know. They know at this point they're just promoting this later doctrine, right? And if the Bible taught the Trinity, right, if it said, hey, Divine nature that these three persons share equally, co-eternally. Yeah, just something basic like that. Well, fine. We don't have that. We have one God the Father. We have all these other things we've been talking about in the angels of the Bible acting in ways that are inconsistent with the Trinity, ultimately. And they force you Trinitarians into so many strange predicaments, argument-wise. Let's see what else Chris had to say here. a lot of good discussion going on. Let's see. I don't know. Something might be going on between Chris and George that I don't know about. So I don't want to get involved. I don't fully understand it just by quick reading. And I don't know anything so about it. Either way, good to see all of you. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. So no show tomorrow. I was going to do a CW Jah talk, pre-Christian evidence, Jesus is the biblical Messiah. I am still, probably next week though. I just had a lot of stuff come up that I have to deal with. So I'll do my best to be back on track with a double header weekend next weekend. We'll pick a topic, something different from the Angels series we've been doing. And we'll pick up next week with something interesting, Jah willing. So until then, may you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name.